everyone. My name is Jazz. I am the president and founder of Multilingual and Philanthropic Incorporated. And I wanted to explain something, which sometimes this can be a little bit of I don't really know exactly what you would say it. Sometimes it can be something that can kind of give off a couple of different meanings when people think of the idea of learning a language on your own. So I really wanted to clarify what that really means from my perspective as a psycholinguist in training, and what that really means, and just breaking down that process. Because as of learning 10 different languages, you have a certain way of learning. You realize that there's a pattern of things that you're learning, and we're kind of going to deep dive into that. So let's get to it. So the first thing I really want to express is that when we say that we're learning a language on our own, it means we're learning it independently. And what I mean by that is that when you think about it, if you are over 18 and you're not studying the language as, let's say, you're majoring in it in college, or it's something that you are studying intensively and you're not forced to learn it. Like when I was in school, it was like I took this I took French, and once I had it on my schedule, I was pretty much forced to go to that class. If I missed class, I would get like an unexcused absence. No one is counting that. Even as an adult, if you pay to take classes, you're actually not obligated to go. You could pay, as a private tutor, people pay me to teach them French, and then they don't show up to the lessons. I've had it happen multiple times. It's not on me. I mean, I'm still getting paid, but at the end of the day, it's on them because they're the ones that really want to learn it. And if you really want to learn a language, it is your responsibility. If you are over 18, you're learning the language again, if you learned it at school, or if you're learning it for the first time, it is absolutely 100% your responsibility. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner everything will kind of fall into place. Well, I wouldn't say fall into place, but the sooner we can kind of find a good starting point. And there's a lot of advantages to learning a language on your own, because when it's just you and you're focusing on yourself, is you basically get to figure out what you want to learn more than anything else. So specifically as an adult, I was studying French specifically as a fashion designer from that lens. So my thing was, ever since I was young, I really wanted to learn French, go to fashion school, move to Paris, and become the next Coco Chanel. That was my thought process in my 6-year-old brain. That was what I wanted to do. And so when I learned, especially when I started learning it after I got out of high school, I was learning it based on the functionality of what I needed to use it for. Okay, so when you're taking classes, for instance, even for me, when I take classes, because right now I'm in a intermediate Italian class. The thing is, there's a mixed level of people in that class, and for me, as someone who's learned Italian for 5 years and trying to get my thing I'm trying to get out of it is just conversational practice, because I know it, but I want to practice it. So in that case, there's a lot of mixed levels. Some people are absolute beginners and they decided to take a level 2 class. So the teacher is most likely, sometimes by tendencies, they're gonna try to focus on the people who are the slow learners. So if you're like me, where I love a challenge, I love languages, I pick them up really quickly, just by nature. So it's from that point of view, you're thinking, okay, well, can we speed this up? When you're learning by yourself, you have the ability to move into certain advanced things that maybe you may not get to if you're taking a class setting. Because like I said, sometimes teachers by tendency, and I know this for myself because I've taught in groups where you're trying to focus on everybody getting to a certain level. And so then the people who are more advanced are just sitting around bored. And if you've ever read The Smartest Kids in the World and How They Got That Way by Amanda Ripley, she talks about when she goes to all these different countries to study the educational system, is that boredom is the biggest killer of education. A lot of people, specifically I know in the US, we have school boards that basically look at student progress, and they kind of evaluate that, and then they talk to the teachers, they talk to the parent. But the thing is, they don't include the students, because the students have to learn this stuff, and if they're bored, there's no amount of research that can really really eliminate that. When students are bored, they'll check out. I've done that before. This stuff is easy, I'm just going to check out. And so it's like always like trying to figure out a balance of how to kind of keep the, you know, the students that need more help and the more advanced students kind of still at a point where they feel like they are learning. But anyway, I digress. I digress. So like I said, you know, in certain, you know, teaching environments where there's multiple students, you're basically having to deal with the fact that maybe certain students might need more help. And so sometimes your class, the whole class is kind of going to end up learning or trying to reiterate what the, you know, the students that need more help might be wanting to go over. So, and it, like I said, it's based on how you learn. So for me, I'm a very visual person. My thing is I learn the foundation. I do this in 2 phases. I learn the foundation, like what's the sentence structure, how to, you know, like, and especially like going over how to use some of these conjugations, because I did not learn how to use the French subjunctive until I took an advanced Italian class. Like I took a course, actually no, I took an online course, and I took the beginner, intermediate, and the advanced. And the advanced class, they teach everything in Italian. And that when they taught the congiuntivo, which is the exact same thing as the subjunctive, I was like, oh, now I know how to use the subjunctive because they explained it to me in Italian. And that was something I never really fully understood when I was in school. So when I learned it on my own, that was when I realized that, okay, I understand, I get it now. You know, you can spend more time looking at those things that you really want to learn more about. So like when you take online classes, like things that you can do on your own pace, like I said, the main thing is just to get the foundation. That's something you can do on your own. Like I'm not saying like get out a little notebook and like, you know, do those conjugation charts, because sometimes I see people who are like, I just really want to get this conjugation, so I'm going to write every single thing down. And I'm like, don't write that down. I'm like, there's cheat sheets for that. Print that out, you know, or something like that, or have it somewhere where it's accessible to you. We have things on our phones now where we don't have to memorize. And I think memorizing is it's monotonous and it's not really interesting. So, and part of being able to learn independently is you get to learn in the way that you want to. So when you learn the foundation, you're learning how the sentence structure works. I usually stay away from like vocabulary and phrases because I feel like you don't have a bunch of words you don't know how to use, especially in context, and having words and phrases that you kind of just can't use interchangeably. Like if you're trying to say, like, if the only thing you know how to say is où sont les toilettes, like where's the bathroom, you know, that's not interchangeable. That's not something you can use in any situation. Like we want to have, I really always focus on my students on figuring out how to have freedom within that language. So once you kind of learn how the language works, then we can go into the second phase, which is mainly application. And like I said before, you are 100% responsible for being able to apply it. So you can learn the language all you want, but it's not going to mean anything if you can't use it. So when I say that is that you have to, like I said, again, you're learning it on your own in the sense of you are the one that is going to be the initiator in learning this language. So, for example, when I was looking at the 4 aspects of communication, so from listening and reading on the passive side of that, is I turned all my devices into that target language. Depending on where I was going. When I was going to Mexico, I had my phone in Spanish. When I was going to Germany, I had my phone in German. I have had my phone in French for the longest time. I've changed it to Italian. At one point, I changed it to Dutch. At one point, I changed it to Portuguese. It depends on which one where I was traveling and who I was talking to at the time, looking at ways to kind of apply it in that sense. So that's the passive side. When you're hearing it, like podcasts, you listen to podcasts all the time. You listen to music all the time. You watch TV, you watch YouTube, this is where this is, So in that case, that's where your main passive exercises are coming from. And the point is to make it fun, like make it applicable, because if you don't really like it, or listening to certain songs or listening to certain podcasts and they're just boring, you're gonna check out. Like I was just saying earlier, just check out, and that, again, that's also not effective. And then when I look at aspects of, let's say, trying to communicate with actual people, the main thing is like I follow the CEFR framework when I am teaching my students, and also in ways that I've learned languages. So CEFR, if you don't know what that is, it means Central European Framework of Reference. It is the standard of learning any foreign language, and those are based specifically on what you can do with those languages. versus like, oh, I can conjugate certain verbs. I mean, there's certain verb conjugations that come up at each level, because I went through, in my high school, they had like French 1, 2, 3, 4, and then AP. But I feel like with the CEFR, it kind of makes a little bit more sense to me in the sense of what you can do at each level. Like by A1, you should be A1 or A2, you should be conversational. You can give certain information about who you are, what you do for a living, go shopping, more or less like the tourist kind of aspects of traveling. And then by the time you get to B1, because when I moved to Germany, I will tell you, it was kind of a rude awakening because I already had my A2 certificate, so I could pretty much communicate, I could understand. When my host father picked me up at the airport, I remember he's like, so you want to speak in English, German? I was like, I said, wir sind in Deutschland, wir sprechen Deutsch. We're in Germany, let's speak German. And as we started driving down the road, I realized that, he said to me, your German's a little bit better than I thought it was going to be. And actually, when I was an au pair, my host parents, they picked me because they knew I spoke the most German out of all the people that they met. That's one qualification. But the main thing is that my host mother did not speak a whole lot of English. And so that was really helpful to have somebody who could speak that language. So that was my advantage. And when I moved there, I realized, first of all, I got a headache because I was not used to using the language that long. And also, like, you only have to consider the fact that when you're trying to create these opportunities, trying to prepare yourself. Like, I mean, for me, I had friends. I was actually dating someone at the time who was German. So, that kind of helped because I only wanted to speak in German. And he was apparently okay with that. And, I had some friends who were from France. When I went there to study in Paris, I was dating while I was there. I went to church while I was there. I was living my life. And again, of course, like the way that you learn a language in school is also not at all the same way that you learn it in the country, because there's so much slang and the language evolves, because the way you learn it in school, sometimes it can be outdated because sometimes people say, other things that you never learned. There's also regional dialects like France. Depending on where you are, they might be influenced by, ancient or old languages like Breton or Occitan. There's some Catalan in there. Also, if you ever read the book, The Story of French, you will learn a lot about the influences, because all of France didn't actually speak French. Those types of things. So over time, that became a universal language, but in the whole sense of everything, like now is that French is not spoken the same way. There's also cultural aspects. I feel like people sometimes forget culture, because even though I had friends, like I remember one of my friends when I was living in LA, she was an au pair from France and she was in LA. That's actually how I learned about the au pair program. And she was saying that, we were speaking back and forth in English and French. And I realized that, again, French is different from what you expect it to be. And it also helps build confidence. Like I said, I had to find these friends. I found her on Bumble BFF because I didn't know anyone in my immediate friend group who spoke this language and spoke it natively. And especially even for me as a tutor, when it comes to my students, my specialty is mainly beginners, because my goal is to prepare my students for native speakers. I will also say, I made another video on finding the right tutor for you, because here's the thing. Native speakers are not always the best teachers of that language. For me as a non-native language speaker, I actually am able to see it from a different lens and be able to look at like patterns or like specific things. Because for me, if I were to teach English, I would know where to start, because I'm like, I learned it. I just speak it since birth. And English is also a very unstable language. It's like all the vowels just go all over the place. And so it's like, if you've ever seen Loic Sepperville, like he does a lot of TikToks and as well as YouTube shorts about language and how complicated it is. And it was like, there's one where he's like, French, how do you say this word? And it's like, oh, that's thorough. Oh, so does this mean this? And it's like, no, that's though. Oh, no, that is cough. No, that's dough. It's just the most unstable language you will ever see. So me as a native speaker, I don't even know where to begin teaching that. That's kind of like mostly, from my experience, is that when you find these native speakers and you know where to find them, because resources are key. I met someone off of Instagram who was from France, and her dad was Mexican, but her mom was French, and she came to California to learn English. We hung out a few times. I took her to church because she also happened to be Christian. So we went to church, and I remember having to interpret a little bit because she didn't fully understand, because our pastor was actually from London. It was a guest pastor who was from London. She's like, I have never heard this accent in my life. So I interpreted for her in that case. And then also, like when I went to Mexico to visit my friend, is that, the default is you just assume that nobody knows your language. So you have to kind of use what you know. Because sometimes I'm afraid to use, like when I was in Paris, I was afraid to use French because I was like, oh, it's not perfect, it's not great. No, just use it. Just use it. It's all you know. So, and then eventually you get better. And people might correct you, and I feel sometimes people are afraid of looking stupid, because I've noticed that even with my students who are absolute beginners, is that they're afraid to look stupid, or they default to I don't know what you're saying versus actually attempting to answer it. It's just something I always try to build confidence around. And everything I teach is basically from native speakers, from native speaker content. Even when I think of like speaking and listening. No, speaking and writing on the active side. I remember having a journal that was specifically in French, and I was, just writing journal entries, just random things. And I remember like texting, like when I would use WhatsApp, like with my family, we have a family friend who lives in Dormagen in Germany. And I would always talk to her. You could send voice messages. I have a friend from Italy she's currently living in London. So we would speak back and forth in Italian, and she would correct me as well. And it was it's just how it is, And then also on top of that is learning circumlocution. Those are things that you can actually pretty much teach yourself to use, but you can teach those to yourself, like sentence starters, so that when you are like trying to say something, you at least have something to start your sentence with. Yeah, over time, I think you just kind of develop the confidence. So the main thing is in phase 1, you're basically just trying to learn the foundation, how this language works. From a psycholinguistic perspective, is that we're pretty much looking at, for me, I'm always looking at the best ways to learn a language, because your brain has the capacity to do a lot of things. Our brain has neuroplasticity, and it's supposed to basically expand. So the more you know, the more your brain expands. And also language learning can actually reduce your chances of getting why is this blanking on me? Getting like Alzheimer's and dementia, because you're using your brain a lot more. And when I look at the techniques of how we learn languages from a baby to an adult, it's pretty much very similar. So when people think that like, oh, like I'm not young as I used to be, and I can't learn a language. Here's the thing. Babies, they pick it up because they just kind of hear it, and they're just kind of grasping what they're grasping everything from their environment. Whereas an adult, you do have something to go off of. I usually try to get my students to try to get to a point where they don't need their native language, but when they're kind of learning it and they're trying to make connections, because making connections is how you remember it a lot better. So when you're looking at that standpoint, like I said, you just learn the foundation. And a lot of times when we're looking at like resources like reading material or TV shows, a lot of vocabulary I've learned is through TV shows. That's why I say I don't teach vocabulary, because there's so many things to learn. And especially if you're learning from a specific industry, find things that you like that are in your field. Like if you love reading like scholar papers or like reports, find something, because that way you'll actually learn a lot of vocabulary. You'll learn how to talk about like change over time. Like if you're a scientist, you can talk about change over time. You can talk about statistics. You can talk about like certain opinions or things that people have written. And the more you read and you get exposed to it, the more it becomes kind of solidified. There are a lot of things I've learned just from context. One of my favorite TV shows to watch is Maman est célèbre. It is one of my favorite French reality shows. I can only watch it with a VPN because it's on TF1, and that's a French broadcasting station. But there's certain phrases I actually use in my vocabulary because I just listened. I just literally am watching them speak, and then I kind of pay attention to the context of how they're using it, and then that kind of just goes into just goes into my vocabulary, and I watch it without subtitles. So, so I really hope this gives you a sense of like what it really means to learn a language on your own. It's very multifaceted, and it's really geared towards you finding a way to learn on your own. Some people, they need to pay for a tutor. That's what I pretty much have done. I've had people who just need someone to teach it to them. Me, I've never had to pay for a tutor because there's so many resources online, and I'm primarily an independent learner. So I've never really had to worry about like having to get someone to, pay someone to teach, especially because I've also had native speaker friends. And also, like, if you're in college, like, international students are like the best. I mean, I had a friend of mine who I met on campus through like some student activities event, and she was on exchange from Italy, and she's like, I want to connect with you. And I had a friend who's always asking me like, how do you find these people? Because I'm trying to learn this language. I'm like, you just have to actively, like I said, when you learn a language on your own, you're actively having to find these resources, having to find people. So that's just kind of where I'm at. So I really hope this helps you, kind of gives you a sense of like how you can learn a language independently. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.